our purpose today is to really focus on, there are 5 questions that when an organization answers those 5 questions, they can actually have their own team aligned, their partners aligned, and most important, they can align with their customers. So we're going to go over those 5 questions and give you a way to think about that. The attendance today is made up of people who we've worked with in the past, that we've connected with over time, that own or run companies, as well as those people who work in those companies. And both of those groups are trying to figure out, how do we grow our business? How do we make more money? How do we make sure we're still here in a few years? And then the final group are those people who support those companies. That could be ad agencies, training companies, SEO, digital agencies, that type of thing. So again, because of the fact we've got so many people, we're going to have everybody muted and use the chat box today. And at the end of the day, when the hour's over, all of you are invited to participate in any of these 4 things. One is stick around and we'll answer questions. The second one is, I hope all of you do this, and that is you take what you hear today and you take it back and you put it to use. That's the reason we're doing this. Then the third thing is, you will also get an email from us that will give you a link to the webinar, but it'll also give you the opportunity to register for the second webinar in this series. And then finally, for those of you who, as you're going through this today, you go, wow, you know, I should be learning more of this science on how to do CRO, Chief Revenue Officer thinking, for myself, for my company, for my career. So in the email we send out, you'll have an opportunity to sign up for that as well. So just to give us a level set here, as little as 40 some years ago, there were no such things as CEOs, CFOs, CIOs. All those things are a result of the last 40 years and the constant change that's gone on in business. And so the newest of those additional parts of our leadership teams is CRO, Chief Revenue Officers. And so today we're going to introduce you to some of the thinking that's required in that CRO space. So the strategy of revenue is so different than many of us were taught in business school. We were taught in business school, well, a strategy is mission, vision, values. And absolutely that's part of the strategy. The other thing that we were taught is, well, it's financial. We give people a budget, and you know, we make them design their year based on the budget that we've given them, and then we ask them what they're going to give us back in the form of revenue or production or whatever we ask. Both of those things are important, and both of them are necessary, but neither one of them monetizes and creates clients and creates your position in the market for growth and for margin and for the value you really bring. So we're going to give you the new piece of that. And to give us a flavor for how important this is, take a second and just try and answer this question for yourself. And that is, research tells us there is one thing, just one thing, that assures a business survival, and it assures it to a 98% degree. So answer for yourself what that is. When I ask CEOs or owners or leaders around the country, I get answers like, well, certainly the right people on the bus, or innovation. And I think it's innovation. Sometimes it's operational excellence. You know, sometimes it's cost control. Well, for yourself, pick what you think it is, but statistically, the one thing is the ability to continuously produce more profitable revenue. As soon as an organization ceases to continuously produce more profitable revenue, it becomes insignificant. And, just ask yourself the question, do you really want to do business with, partner with, contract with a company that's insignificant? And insignificance is the first step to the company not surviving. So if you want to have your company survive and then have the opportunity to thrive, the first thing you got to do is figure out, how do I continuously produce more profitable revenue? And that's why the strategy we're going to do today is so important. Now, no matter how good your strategy is, there are things that actually get in the way of survival and thriving. So I want to kind of paint that picture, because as we build our strategy, probably the single most important thing the strategy can do is align everybody in our world. And so the things that get in the way, probably my favorite business author is W. Edwards Deming. And some of you may know he's the founder of really the quality movement that we've had over the last 50 or 60 years, the Six Sigma, Lean, ISO. He was sent by actually General MacArthur at the end of World War II over to Japan to help Japan rebuild. And he did such a good job, they came over and kicked our butts for decades. And so, he taught them that a bad system beats a good person every time. So as we're creating our strategy, and the reason the alignment is so important is bad systems aren't aligned. So we can make huge changes in your company if you create a strategy that everybody can align with, because you probably have good people. Nobody on this call got up in the morning and said, I'm going to hire a bunch of bad people, or I'm going to hire a bunch of people that really don't want to do their jobs. We all hire people we think are really good, and probably we're right. And frequently, the system we put them in is where they get in trouble. Let me give you an example, and we've all heard this story before. It's the blind man and the elephant. And if you think about the way the blind men are analyzing the elephant, if they were going to try and build something from their perceptions, it would not be an elephant. And it probably wouldn't function at all. And so in business, we do the same thing. If our organization is not aligned so that it sees the same thing in every department, the likelihood we have a highly efficient, functioning organization around revenue generation is pretty remote. So our goal really becomes, how do we get everybody to recognize it's an elephant and to focus their energy, their commitment, their working together around the same set of goals? Now, for some of us that have been around a little while, we've noticed that the technology that we live with today has drastically changed our world. So I want to show you a real quick video, and I want you to pay real close attention to it because it has some really good stories in it, plus it's kind of fun. But it will set the stage for the strategy that we're going to develop here in a minute. So pay attention to this as to how this is going to impact your world and the strategy that you're going to go build, because frequently today people build strategies that don't take this into account. And if you don't take this into account, your strategy is probably going to be flawed. So enjoy. I don't think we need it twice. What I'd like you to do before I take the next step is just think for a minute, and if you got paper and you're writing notes, just write down one or two things from that video that you need to be thinking about in relation to either your job or your company or your clients. And so that in when we finish this today, you can come back to those things and remember that this world has changed, and we've got to perform differently in it. So just take a second, and before I flip, and write those things down. A couple of the takeaways from that video clip that are they're game-changing compared to even 15 years ago. And as you build your strategy, as you think of your business and what you take to the market, the two things that we just can't not consider are the buyers in the world today, those people that we want to partner with, that we want to sell to, that we want to identify how we're going to bring value and be paid for value. They believe the world is transparent. They believe that they can see who's out there, who's solving certain problems, who they can trust. So you got these two things going on. The buyers out there, the first thing almost all of us do when we need something, or even if we don't know what we need, when we're struggling with something, we go to Google. And we start reading, and we start checking things out, and we look at videos, and we see Facebook, and we're on LinkedIn. And so the first thing we're doing is we're looking at the world and trying to figure out what out there in the world fits us. And we believe we can find almost anything. The interesting challenge for a lot of companies, particularly small, mid-sized companies, is often we don't do a very good job sharing the value that we bring to the world in a digital way. And in some cases, I deal with a lot of companies, they don't even have a LinkedIn page. And their website is very 1980s kind of thing. So, the transparency, if you don't use it to your advantage, it is almost always a detriment. The second part is, because the world's transparent, at least people believe it's transparent, part of what they're looking for, the buyer is looking for, is they're looking for who they can trust. If a buyer identifies 3 or 4 or 5 potential companies that might be able to do the job, they immediately try and figure out which ones do I trust, which one's not going to cause me problems, which one do I believe in, and they cross 2 or 3 of the other ones off. So as you build your strategy and as you roll out your company over the next few years, recognize the fact the world believes it's transparent, and if you're hiding, if they can't find you, their interpretation of that means there's something sinister there, and their goal is to see who can solve their problems that they trust. So, that's the transition that we've all got to deal with. And when I grew up in the sales marketing world, I started out with, selling vacuum cleaners, cookware, used cars, door to door. And today, I haven't seen a door-to-door salesperson in a long time. And the few that are there are almost always connected with a charity. And so the future is none of us like cold calls. None of us like door-to-door salespeople. In businesses, we don't like unannounced salespeople sitting in our lobby. We don't like people in our face. We're getting conditioned to that digital world where I am in charge. So we better accept the fact buyers are in charge today. There was a time when the seller was in charge. Henry Ford used to say, you can have any car, any color, as long as it's black. Well, Henry was in charge. He produced most of the cars in the world. And if you wanted one of Henry's cars, you got black. Of course, we know that that wouldn't be anything like that today. So if we accept the fact that the buyer is in charge, then we need to recognize that our goal is to get the buyer to opt in to a conversation with us. The buyer's got to believe that there's enough value in a conversation. Now, conversation can be a phone call, it can be digital, it can be going to hear a webinar. There's all kinds of ways conversations can occur. But today, it's the buyer opting into those conversations rather than us dictating to the buyer, here's what you need. So, and the way buyers opt in is when they recognize that you may be able to solve a problem they have. Now, the problem can be, I need more copy paper, and it's not very complex. The problem can be, I've just been diagnosed with cancer and I need to find the best treatment situation possible. Or it could be, I need new software and I need to understand, what kind of choices do I have? Do I want it in the cloud? Do I want it on my server? Where do I want it? So they can be all kinds of problems. But from the client's frame of reference, they are not typically looking for your product unless they know so much they don't need anything other than price and availability. So think about your business and the strategy you're going to create so that you're helping the market opt in to you. One of the simple ways to manage the strategy that you're going to create so everybody can be aligned is what we call a true north. And it's as simple as identifying those things that you are absolutely going to be doing. We talked earlier, one of the typical strategy pieces is your vision, your mission, your culture statements. Those would be examples of things that are right up there where the N is. And you're trying to get your team to think about, you're trying to empower your team. You know, we said the bad system beats a good person every time. Well, one of the problems with systems is when it's not clear what people can and can't do and shouldn't do based on where we're going. And so when you create the true north, if your true north says, you know, here's our mission, vision, value, here's the things that we absolutely believe in and we're not going to compromise, then things that compromise that are at the south. And if we say we are a high value support for our client, that's north. And somebody says, well, we want you to bid a price sensitive deal and give us the lowest possible price. We don't care about your value. That's south. So it's a simple way. And as you go through this, you want to think about your strategy as in those things we're going to empower our people to do and those things we're going to empower our people to say, nope, don't do that. You don't even have to ask. That's going south. We're not going there. So let's take a look at the 5 questions. I said there's 5 questions that we've got to be able to answer in order to be able to have a revenue strategy that aligns everybody in your building, all your customers, and all your partners and your community with you and what you're doing. So let's take a look. 5 questions are simple. Simple to ask and a little more complex to answer. And we're going to break them into 3 groups. And the first group we're going to talk about is the brand promise, coupled with the customer problem that we solve for our customer that no one else solves. And the brand promise, probably everybody on the phone is already pretty good at. You already have an idea of your mission, your vision, your values, what your culture stands for, all of those kinds of things. You've probably done a really good job of identifying those things. Now, they're critical. They are like the ante in a poker game. You don't get to play, or at least not very long, if you can't answer these questions. Because one of the things, very hard to hire people. When people come to interview or possibly go to work for you, if you don't have some reason they want to work there, if your only purpose is to take people's money, that's not a very enticing employment situation. It's pretty short term today. So, you probably already got that. The problem with that is you can't monetize it. There typically aren't people in line to come in your office and give you money because of your mission statement. And there probably aren't people sending you the credit card number because you have a values statement. So while these are essential and necessary, when we talk about brand, these are critical elements of the brand, but they don't monetize. So question 2, the customer's problem that we solve for the customer that no one else solves, that's where the monetization is going to come from. So when we think about this, we absolutely have to make the statement of, our purpose as a company, but we also have to be able to figure out what it is we're going to do that is going to compel people to give us money. And if we don't define it as an organization, then every person in your company makes it up every day. And when they make it up every day, that's the term we use in revenue science, that creates chaos. And it's the chaos to produce revenue. If you have 10 salespeople and everyone's making it up every day, it's very hard to scale, grow, even control the delivery of the products and services you're trying to sell. So let's have a way to think about this. And the way to think about this is using 3 words. And we're going to start on the right side of the page with what. And if we had the time right now, went out and looked at 10 or 50 or 100 websites, 90% of them would talk about what they do. If you went to a plumbing website, they'd say, well, we have Roto-Rooter. We have 25 trucks. We have 3 locations. We're open 24 hours. We have an 800 number. We take Visa. And they would, if you looked at 10 of those plumbing websites, 9 of them would say almost the same thing. And so as a customer, just stop and think for a second. If you went to 10 websites and they all said the same thing, what would your decision criteria be? Well, for most of us, if they all look the same, and I can't really tell any difference because they use the same words, I'm probably going with whoever answers the phone at 2 in the morning and is the cheapest. So if in your business, when you're defining your brand promise and the problem you solve, if you define it as what you do, just recognize you ask to get the lowest amount of margin possible and to be in the most competitive situation there can be. Because you're using the same words as everybody else, chances are your customers don't even fully understand how you're any different than anybody else. And so they're going to not really care who they buy from, and they're not going to pay you very much because somebody else will do it. And if they call enough people, they'll find somebody who'll do it cheaper. So as you're building your strategy and you're talking about the problem you solve and you're talking about those things in your brand promise that are important, if they're very commoditized and candidly boring, don't be surprised if that's the outcome you get. You know, there's a term from a book called Human Brand, and in that they study what motivates millennials both to want to do business with you and to want to work for you. And in the case of the millennials, they're immediately, because of the transparency and because of the trust factor, they immediately go to, are you a business that makes money from your customer? Or are you a business that makes money with your customer? Now, if you were a make money from your customer company, your conversation at headquarters would be, how do we get a bigger wallet share? How do we cross-sell them? How do we upsell them? How do we create a contract that it's really hard for them to get out of, so they're stuck with us for a long period of time? That's the mindset of make money from your customer. You're really just thinking about how do I get deeper and deeper and deeper in their pocket. And there was a time when companies could get away with that. That time is past because of the transparency and the demand for trust. That's just not going to play very long. Because if there's anybody else out there in your business that is making money with their customer, and they're really focused on making their customer's world better and expecting to get compensated for it, who's going to call you? So immediately when you're starting to build your strategy, you want to think about that problem you solve and that brand promise as, do I have, am I in business to support my customer or get money out of their pocket? That's one of those true north things too. Because if you say I'm there to make money with my customer, that's north. And any situation that comes up that's from your customer, you got to say no to. Along that same line, there's some of you are familiar with Simon Sinek or actually the Human Brand book. Both of them focus on that why word up there. In Human Brand, they call it worthy intention. But what they're really saying is that there's a lot of companies out there today that their purpose, their mission, vision, value part of their world says there's something as important or more important than just making money. And that could be, in the case of Disney, it's the happiest place on earth. In the case of BMW, it's the ultimate driving machine. In the case of Apple, it's we're going to make a dent in the universe. We're going to help people understand how they can be individuals in today's complex mass production world. So the interesting thing is when you think about your mission, vision, value, which is heavily part of that why, worthy intention, and then you think about the problem you solve, you get to choose whether you solve a what problem or, as Disney and BMW and Apple, a why problem. Now, one of the cool things about solving a why problem, I'm going to do a timeout because every one of you out there, I'm guessing, is thinking, well, all my competitors do the same thing I do. And that's a what thought process. If Disney thought that way, they'd be an amusement park, like the county fair. And they're the farthest thing from that. They're the happiest place on earth. So every one of you can be a why company. Now, is it work to sort through a whole bunch of, you've been conditioned to be a what company because for a long time that's how the world worked, or at least that's how we thought the world worked. Probably never really worked that way, but we got the myth permeated. So every one of you can be a why company. Now, just to give you a flavor from when we talk about revenue generation, the difference between a why and a what company in Apple's case, when Apple competes against a what company like a Gateway or somebody like that, the difference between Apple and the what company is about 18 margin points. Not only is it 18 margin points, but who do you think gets the most referrals? Who do you think has the highest repeat customer ratio? All of these benefits come back to Apple because they're a why company. And that isn't even the biggest part. The biggest part is when Apple talks about we're going to help you make a dent in the universe, we're going to help you personalize your world, have some control over at least your electronic devices, they also have the ability to, under that umbrella of make a dent in the universe, really doesn't matter if they're selling computers or phones or TVs or download music. Every one of those is helping us to have control over our world. And you got the how piece in the middle. The great companies start with why and then describe how. For example, in Apple's case, why was we're going to make a dent in the universe. How is we are going to tie together art and technology into simple, easy to use, elegant tools for the everyday human to make their life better. Well, what we do is we make computers. But when you start as a what company, it's very difficult to migrate up, and you have to rebrand every new thing you go sell. For example, I used Gateway a minute ago. Gateway tried to get in the TV business. They tried to get in a bunch of businesses. They always failed because people identified them as a what company? You build cheap computers. So as you're answering these two first questions, what's the brand promise? And just to be clear, the brand promise is how your customers, your partners, your employees, and your community experience you when they do business with you, when they work for you, when you're the next door neighbor factory on the block. They want to know, how am I going to experience you? And that's your brand promise. That's your why, your mission, your value, your worthy intention. That's the really important part. And for those of you who haven't seen Simon Sinek's YouTube TED video, strongly suggest it. It really focuses on the why and how important that is for your company. So the first two questions, we got to get really good at clarity around our brand promise and the customer problem we solve no one else solves. I want to give you an example of the power in being able to answer that problem question. If we believe the goldfish in the video, where the goldfish has an attention span of 0.8 seconds and we have 0.7, what that really says is when somebody comes to your website, they're going to decide if they want to stay there or not in a second or less. And in a second or less, nobody is going to be able to read. We have Roto-Rooter, we have 7 locations, we have 3 800 numbers, we have 200 employees, been around 35 years, we're open 24 hours. You can't read all that in 0.8 seconds. What you can read in 0.8 seconds is a statement of the problem you solve. In my world, the problem I solve is for those people who want to be able to predictably grow their sales and profitable revenue, we're the people to talk to. That's the problem I solve. You can read that in a second. So get really clear, because when you meet somebody at a trade show or a conference and they say, what do you do? First, that's a what question. Your answer needs to be something like, well, we found people in industries like yours often have this problem. Do you have this problem? The answer they give will tell you whether this is a potential client for you or not. If they say, oh no, we don't have that problem, never had that problem, doesn't have anything to do with us. Okay, well, nice to meet you. That's the problem we solve. Bye. If on the other hand they go, oh yeah, we got that problem, now you're on the path to seeing if this really is a qualified suspect for you. But it's worth the time, because they're sitting there going, oh yeah, you could see it in their eyes, you could hear the emotion. Yeah, we got that problem. So in literally less than a minute, you can qualify people based on the problem. But if you're going to sit there and tell them what you do all day long and hope that you tell them something that they go, oh, I know what that is, completely different situations. So get really good at the problem. Because once you know what the problem you solve is, now number 3 comes into play. The niche or niches that you are going to dominate or currently do dominate. I've been picking on Apple here for a minute, but most people don't consciously think about it, that Apple dominated a niche for decades. And the niche they dominated was the art and the music and the graphics niche. That's why they did so well in schools and ad agencies and places like that, because they were really good at that stuff. Yet they only had 5% of the computer industry at the biggest point of their history. So they chose a niche they could dominate and really dominate and get those high margins by providing great value by dominating a niche. So if you know the problem you solve, now your question is, in your strategy, okay, I could sell it to everybody, but it doesn't have the same value for everybody. So where are those places where they have this problem that we solve, and it's really important they solve it, and it's easy for them to financially justify solving it because it makes their business better. Remember, you either make money from or with. So this is one of those where when you're picking a niche to dominate and you know the problem you solve, you know which of those places find great value in what you're going to go do with them. And so they absolutely see you as there to make money with them, not from them. So figuring out the niche that you're going to go dominate is a big deal. And niches are about industries. They can be about geographies, but they're fairly big things and they're impersonal. Number 4 completely changes that and goes personal. An ideal customer is a human being. And they're a human being that has the problem that you solve for them that nobody else solves. Just imagine, is there anybody in the world that wants to do business with you faster than a human being who has the compelling problem you solve that nobody else solves? I mean, come on. This is the easiest person in the world to sell to. They really understand why what you do is important, because that problem is in the way of their company or their career or their fortune or their peace of mind. That problem is really blocking something in them that's compelling. So if you can articulate that problem and identify a niche, now the trick is, and today one of the things that's very different than 15, 20 years ago is often the ideal customer is a team. There can be 3 or 4 people, or even, leaders of 2 different divisions in a company trying to solve the same problem. So it used to be find one buyer and that's all you got to do and they'll do the deal. I don't know if that was ever really true, but today it is absolutely not true. Decisions are frequently team activities today. So that identifying those ideal customers so that they help to bring you in. At my house, theoretically, there's 2 of us that make a decision, and my wife tells me what that decision we're going to make is. But you do have to sell to both of us. So it really doesn't matter if you're selling refrigerators or if you're selling refrigeration systems for airports. The issue is there are more people involved than just one, and you need to be talking about how the problem affects each of those players. So let me give you some tools around that. One of the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, thinking tools is, some of you may know this as the diffusion of innovation curve. Some of you may have read some books by Jeffrey Moore or some other people, and they call it the bell curve. If you've seen or will see the Simon Sinek video on why, he'll call it diffusion of innovation curve. What you'll be familiar with is, over here in the left, this track 1 activity, those are what are called innovators, and then early adopters, and early mass market and late mass market, and laggards over here on the right. And at this point, there's 60 years of research on this. This is not opinion of Rick. This is 60 years of research. They can tell you the percentage of people who are innovators and what percentage are early adopters. It's not an option. It just is. And so as you're building your strategy and you identify the problem you solve, and you're now going to take it into niche and ideal buyers, you need to align those things. So let me give you an example. When people go to buy stuff over in track 5, the commodity track, think about copy paper or, athletic socks or gas or milk. First, most of us don't need any sales help to buy those things. Really, all we typically care about is how much does it cost. And in the case of copy paper, if you're buying it 10 reams at a time, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I get it home? It's really price and availability. And so when we sell on the right, we don't need salespeople. It is a mass marketing situation. If you want to encourage us, put it on Amazon or put it on someplace where I can find it quick, make a quick decision, and don't have to worry about it again. But the other ways people sell it are coupons or specials or deals, which again is the 2 variables, price and logistics. Let's lower the price, we'll get more people come in and buy it. So that's on the right side of the curve. On the left side of the curve, we're not selling stuff. You know, the right side is really about selling stuff, and it's a what sale, to go back to our why, how, what. And the left side is really a why sale. And if it's really left, the buyer has never heard of it before. They've never owned one. They've never priced one. They don't have a friend that has one. But all of a sudden, they realize there's something special out there. Now, today, the something specials that people are just waking up to are artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, predictive analytics, you know, and we all kind of think we've heard of it, we know it exists, but none of us are quite sure what to do with it. So if you're selling on the left side, it's not the stuff that's so important. What's important is the seller's brain to explain to the buyer why the stuff's important, where the value is for the buyer, and why the buyer's life will be way better off if they put this predictive analytics or this AI or whatever this thing is to work in their business. Now, some other simple differences when you're building your strategy is when you're on the left-hand side, the niches you dominate need to be on the left-hand side as well. And then the certain industries live on the right-hand side. Certain industries live on the left. Certain companies live on the right. Certain companies live on the left. So when we talk about alignment, once you are clear whether you sell brain, which is stuff over here on the left, or you sell stuff, which is, you know, typically retail, restaurants, those kinds of things. And you can move a restaurant quite a bit to the left. You know, a lot of chefs, that's the whole thing, is the special recipes and processes and so on and so forth. But once you decide, now a lot of things get clear. On the left-hand side, it's not coupons, it's not TV ads, it's white papers, it's blogs, it's webinars. It's those kinds of things that educate the market that there's a better, different, again, back to we're going to help your business be better. You know, we're going to make money with you. We're going to show you that there's a better way for you to solve this problem than you maybe even ever heard of before. So the left side is much more educational, much more consultative, and the pricing for the two are completely different. On the right-hand side, pricing is typically cost plus or what will the market bear, that type of thing. On the far left-hand side, there's a mathematical formula. And it simply says, back to the customer problem you solve, no one else solves, the customer will pay you 1/10 of the size of the problem. So if you show a customer they are throwing away $10 million because of the way they're handling their data backup, they're going to pay $1 million. Now, it might cost you almost nothing because you're really coming in with a methodology and a little piece of software, and you're going to show them how to save 10 million, they'll pay $1 million. Not only will they pay you $1 million, they won't do business with you if they don't get to pay you $1 million. Because the research says if you try and charge them $2 million, then they're going, okay, I've never done this before. I can get 10 back, but I got to spend $2 million on something I've never done before with a vendor I've never dealt with before. That's too scary. I'm not going to do it. Likewise, if you charge them less than $1 million, neuroscience tells us that they go, oh my gosh, they don't understand the problem. If they understood this was a $10 million problem and they really knew how to fix it, they wouldn't do it for $500,000. That would be ridiculous. And if they're ridiculous, I don't want to do business with them. So as you study revenue science and you put your strategy together, the key here is to align your strategy with your niches and your ideal buyers so that everybody's on the same page, pretty much doing the same stuff with the same messages, and the same metrics. And we'll do metrics in the second one. But I'll tell you, we can measure all this stuff if we have a strategy. If we don't have a strategy, then everything's chaotic, and chaos is hard to measure. So now we got one more that we want to take a look at. And of the 5, the first 4 are conceptually easy, but the 5th one is probably the most work, certainly the most work. And that says, what are the key offers that will really compel the ideal buyers to do business with us? Because if you tell me you can solve my problem, and I even believe you can solve my problem, if I happen to be in Europe and you don't serve clients in Europe, then that's not working real well. So I have to have an offer that the buyer, the ideal buyer, can say, yes, that way of doing business works for me. And when you think about the offers, it certainly starts with the product or service. But it also requires that the offer is consistent with the problem you solve, your brand promise. All of those things need to be consistent in this offer. So if you say, well, yeah, we're a high value company, that's who we are, but this offer, this is really, we're the cheapest guys in town, you're going to scare the crap out of the customer. And you're going to confuse your own team, and you're going to confuse the market. And that kind of confusion adds to chaos and slows down all your business. So the offers are and we'll show you in the second webinar how you create offers intentionally so that they're easier to manage and easier to grow and easier to continuously improve. But they are very specific things, and they take a process. And one of the challenges for many, well, all size companies, but small, mid-size in particular, we tend to do whatever bluebird flies in the window. And we say, wow, that's worth $500,000. I better go do that. And now pretty soon we've got like 10 things we're going to do. And the reality is offers are expensive to manage because we've got to teach our whole team, our delivery part of the organization's got to be on board. We got to have the right pricing. We got to have the right marketing. We got to have all these things for each offer. So for most of us, someplace between 2 and 5 offers, if they're well done, is all we need. And it also allows us to focus, and it also allows us to, have the whole community, buyers, sellers, everybody, staff, understand who we are. And it's so much easier to hire employees and get customers and get partners if they really know who you are and they support the same worthy intention, the same why. They also want to make money with their customers. All of a sudden, it's easier to create a team to go into the market. So the other thing about niches, aside from the fact you have to define them, including fees and the role of the buyer, the role of the seller, time frames, who manages which risk, what happens if you need to do engineering, change control, all of those things are part of the offer. So it's not a 5-minute job. It's not even a half-a-day job. It's probably a job that continues to evolve over time, but there's a fair amount of work because once you have the offer, the next thing you got to do is take the offer to market. And so when you go to take your offer to market, it has to go through what we call the revenue roadmap. None of this will surprise you, but the revenue roadmap typically starts with and for some of you on here today, this may not be true. It's typically true with about 95% of all the people out there, and that is that the humans who might buy from you, there are infinitely more of them than you have resources to go attack them. So, if there's 10,000 companies in the country that might buy from you and you got 5 salespeople, that's a good example of it's infinitely greater than your resources to go attack it. So in this century, if you go back to the goldfish and the digital world, it's no longer about, us going door to door. It's about the customer's in charge. We want the right customers to opt in and explore what it is, the problem we can solve for them, so that jointly we can figure out if together we should go forward. Because if we go forward with the wrong people, we don't make any money. It hurts our brand. It really creates problems inside our organization. People aren't feeling good about themselves. The delivery people say, that's not what I thought I was going to deliver. So it's really important that we go through these stages with the customer. 25 years ago, I didn't say this because, we didn't realize the customer was in charge at that point. But step one is, from that infinite number of suspects, how do we get them to investigate us to see if we really can solve their problem, and us to investigate them to see if we can really solve their problem and make money. And so that's the first step. And then the second step says, okay, we've narrowed this infinite number of suspects down and down. Now in early qualify, we're starting to throw some more away. And we'll talk about how to do that in a few minutes. But and then late qualify, that's where sales picks up. And sales says, okay, we got some people that kind of look okay. I really have to decide if they really want to do something now, and if they look like they're the right player. That's a sales function. Now, interestingly, Amazon does that sales function online in about a minute. So this process can be Amazon, and they go end to end in 4 minutes. Or it can be IBM, and they could go end to end in 4 years. So, but the process doesn't change. The duration and the intensity and the velocity change, but the process doesn't. And so then once sales says, yeah, these people are kind of okay, then you do what we call solidify, which really means, when you say X, do you mean 5 or do you mean 7? Because we mean 7. And so if we aren't meaning the same thing, the last thing we want is go to contract for something and find out what they thought we contracted for and what we thought we contracted weren't the same things at all. And so then the next step is contract, and the next step is delivery. And you'll see in this picture that delivery is a critical, almost the critical element of a revenue generation process. People would tell us, still tell us today in some cases, well, revenue generation and sales are the same thing. Well, I have been a lifetime salesperson, and I am an accountant. And I can assure you, as an accountant, revenue only occurs at the point we have delivered something to the customer and they accept it. That's the only time we can legitimately recognize revenue. Sales often brings us contracts we look at and say, sorry, we can't do that, or the customer withdraws, or there's a million reasons that a salesperson does what they do and they think they're done, but we never recognize revenue on the other side. So sales is a step in the process, and delivery is a step in the process. We often criticize sales because they don't bring us enough deals, and that may be true, but we should focus more on the deals we get. Do we deliver them as efficiently and as effectively as possible, as fast as possible? Because if delivery extends 2 weeks at the end of the year, we lost 2 weeks of revenue that sales actually sold. So this process says, can we separate the mass from those people who really kind of look like our ideal client? Can we identify those that we think can afford us, that kind of that fits right, they're in the right geography or whatever that is, and they have the problem we solve? And then we start to go through which ones do we have unfair advantages with, and we get into getting the customer to want a proposal, want to know, how do you solve that problem? That's the awe piece. They're awed. How do you do that? And the way we demonstrate to them that is we do what we call a joint statement of work. And then they sign a contract, and then the key is making sure delivery actually accomplishes this in the shortest period of time. We'll also show you in the next webinar, delivery is the most single powerful place for new business, and we'll show you what that really looks like. So the results of this, once you have a strategy that people align to, and this 5-step process is really going to come out more in the next webinar, but most of us, 99% of companies are in step 1. It's a bunch of individual contributors working their butts off. It's the good people in the bad company, bad process. And, we have to hope for silver bullets, good luck, and the economy being great. And then step 2, we get a little more organized, and step 3, and so on and so forth. And when you get up to step 5, these are the people that love a bad economy. They love it because they're so well run that the good customers come running to them in a bad economy, because these are the people that help the customer make more money. They help the customer make better decisions and end up with better results. So the other thing is, in a bad economy, these companies that are at step 5, they're hiring all the good people from the companies that are disappearing or in trouble, and they're of course picking up all the good customers. So, we'll talk about this more in the next webinar, but this is where we're trying to get people to go. So we're pretty much at the end of our time, and so I want to thank you for coming today, and I hope we've given you some ideas about how you can just answer those 5 questions and then start to align. And if you answer the 5 questions, you are starting to align, and your team is starting to get clarity about how they work together, rather than sales going, marketing never gives me any good leads, and marketing going, we give them great leads, they never do anything with them. We got to get rid of all that craziness. And so at this point, we're going to stick around if we've got some questions. We don't have a lot up there right now, but if we get a couple in a minute, I will stick around and answer them. You can please, I hope you take this and start to put it to use in your own businesses. And while this is strategy that you don't have to wait till the end of the year to do for next year. This is stuff that you can actually start working on right away. There's no reason you can't start answering these questions immediately. And you will be receiving from us an email that will let you early register for the next webinar. We don't have the date for it yet, but we'll get your name on there, and we'll make sure you have plenty of advance notice on the next one. And for those of you who've listened to this going, wow, I need to figure out how to do this in a much more intense way, and this can help my business and my company, we want to think about certifying so that we really learn how to do all of this, not just the hour that we've had together. You'll have a way to sign up for that as well. So with that, we're at the end of the hour, and I want to sincerely thank everybody for joining us, and I hope you are with us the next time. And I'm going to stay right here, and I am going to see if we get any questions come across that you want me to answer. So I'll be here for a minute. Thank you very much. I appreciate the nice comments. I'll still wait for a few minutes for questions. Great question. The question is, how should we think about the cost for problems that don't have a clear cost? I'm sure Ryan's got something. Oh, he's putting a little more in there. Pricing for an offer. Okay, that's probably a separate question. Okay, I'm going to do the first, I'll do Ryan's first. Ryan, one of the things in revenue science we would say, and I think I mentioned I am a recovering cost accountant, so I believe there is very little, and I really believe nothing or very close to nothing, we can't attach a cost to. Part of revenue science is a thing we call revenue resources required, and it's really a way to measure and manage every single solitary cost in the process of producing revenue. And production of revenue is organization-wide, so this is really covering a huge amount. One of the things we do in that, and that will be part of the next seminar, is one of the things we measure is leverage. So if we set out to do a trade show, for example, one of our questions is, if we're going to invest $50,000 in the trade show, we want to know what's the leverage, and leverage is defined as, in that revenue roadmap you looked at, do we increase more people into the investigate early qualify section? And if that's our outcome, the only outcome, and we put 20 of them in there, but we spent 50 grand for the trade show, then what we're saying is the leverage for that was not very good, because we're talking about what, $2,500 a lead. And then my question becomes, how many other ways could I have spent less money to get 20 leads? And I can actually start to measure my choices. Could I have done a webinar? Could I have done an email blast? Could I have produced YouTubes and sent them out? So we believe, and if at some point, if the next webinar doesn't answer it, if you and I want to talk sometime, we can talk about specifically what you want to measure. But I don't think there's many things we can't measure. And we have a whole bunch of tools that actually do that. So I don't know if that really covered it or not. Pricing for an offer, that's one we have great history in. The market looks at every offer based on the degree which they get value. And when we price an offer, one of the things that we overlook, if you remember the bell curve we had up earlier in the slides, let's see if I can get back to that. The person on the right-hand side for a printer is not going to pay very much. They're going to look at every place I can try to find a printer cheaper than the one you want to sell me, and that's how they're going to do this. On the other hand, if the printer is part of a point of sale system, and the printer has to be specifically programmed and integrated for scanning, to talk with payroll, to be able to print printouts coming from inventory, all of a sudden they don't care about the cost of the printer. The printer can be almost twice as much, and it's okay, because what they really want is they want the right data in, the right data out. So what the market tells us is when they respond to our offer, they get very clear in our brain as to whether what we're doing is valuable or not. The caveat to that, because a lot of you are going to say, well, you know, I know I have a high value offer, but nobody's willing to pay it. Oftentimes, we have an offer that lives over here on the left side. We try to sell it to somebody on the right. By definition, they're not going to get it. I have clients all the time tell me, well, we do this high value stuff and procurement doesn't get it. Procurement is paid to not get it. So if you go call on procurement and they don't get your value, let's not be surprised. So the pricing for the offer is based on the value, and the value is communicated around the problem you solve. So and there's a skill to this, but the skill is when you're talking to the customer, it's a questioning conversation, and you know, you saw the word clarify and solidify, I think, on the roadmap. You know, we clarify with the customer, this is the problem. We solidify the extent of the problem. And while we're doing that, we're determining the value that solving that is worth. And we can ask those questions. So I hope that helps. But if we want to talk about it sometime, we absolutely can. The next question is, how do you integrate an old generation and the millenniums together? And that's a really interesting one. I think there's two clear answers to that. One of them is millennials, we just got to face it, communicate in a different way. You know, they want it on their phone. I've got a client, we work in the real estate title issuance world. And there's a whole bunch of people that want to be able to buy a house by submitting an offer to buy, requesting the mortgage, closing the deal, and getting the title all from their phone in their living room. So when we talk about offers, the offer for the millennial is different than the offer for me. I do stuff on the phone, but maybe it's my eyes and I want it on a computer. So if you give it to me on a phone, I'm going to avoid you because I can't see it. So it's not the product that's important. It's the offer that you make. So you can have a single product with multiple offers if there's enough profit per offer. In other words, if there's enough old guys like me that got to have it on a computer, you can create an offer. I'm going to think about title insurance for a moment just because that's a place I work. We can create an offer for old people that is computer driven, and even we'll print it out and give you paper if you have to have it. Versus if I want to have millennials do a lot of business with me and I'm not end to end all on the phone, I'm just not in their game. So this is where offers get so important, because the ideal buyer in the millennial case and the ideal buyer in the senior case are two different people, and they need two different offers. Hopefully that helps. Let's see, Ellen, do you have a formula to establish the why short of the Simon video? Interesting question. You know, why is one of those things a lot of us struggle with, and what I found is sometimes we have to change the word. Simon uses why. The human brand uses worthy intention. Simon also uses belief or passion when he talks about Martin Luther King, for example. You know, I have a dream. And so often we get too hung up on the word. What's important is there's something bigger than the deal. Most of us, if we see a vendor, a partner, whatever we want to call them, and all they care about's the money, that's, for me personally, that's scary, because I know what they're trying to do is get deeper and deeper in my pocket because they have no other motivation. But when I see somebody who has a passion for, you know, in the case of BMW, it's about the ultimate driving machine. Disney, it's about, you know, Disney's not cheap by any stretch, but they're there to make that the happiest place on earth, and they go crazy to make that happen. So whether I call that a why or a worthy intention or a theme or a big picture or a mission, it's bigger than the deal. So to me, the why is all about you're in business for something more important than the deal. And it's interesting, if we go back to the goldfish video and we get done and it's transparent and trust, if we have a company that doesn't do anything bigger than the deal, that's transparent, and it doesn't generate trust. So hopefully that helps. And let's see. One last here, Bruno. Okay, well, I think we're good for today. I thank everybody for being here, and I hope you'll join us for the second one. And if you have other people to invite, please feel free when you get the notification to pass it on to them as well. So I thank you, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.